One of the most memorable things about the Jedi and the Sith orders, other than their organizations, are the places in which they reside. The Ziggurat-style Jedi Temple on Coruscant is one of the most iconic locations in the galaxy, and we've had the pleasure of exploring many other Jedi structures in various locations which serve as enclaves, libraries, sanctuaries, and even tombs in some cases. They are quiet places which promote serenity and looking outside of oneself at the Force around them. But on the flip side, locations which are completely shrouded in mystery are the Sith temples. We hear of them only as fables, places filled with shadow and evil, where unspeakable horrors are carried out and untold secrets of the dark side are explored. Rarely do we ever get to actually get a peek of what's inside of these temples, except for maybe the ones on Korriban. But one thing many have in common is the terrifying way that they've been constructed. Our researchers have noted that many Sith temples have a dual purpose, being both a housing place and something as a double weapon. So, join us today as we open a holocron and delve into the secrets of the construction of the Sith temples. In ancient times, the Sith purebloods insisted on building their temples in a pyramidal fashion, a common thing amongst many Sith temples to this very day. It was said that the sloping angles pointed towards a single top, and this was meant to represent the power structure of Sith culture. But that's not the only thing. Ancient Sith runes were carved into the sides of the pyramid, which would actually channel the arcane energies of the Force towards a single point at the very heart of the Sith temple. With each angle of the mausoleums focusing their energy inward, Sorzis Sin described just standing at the intersection of a temple gave her a feeling like a rush of wind and a shiver of electricity. It was at these points where many ancient Sith lords would conduct their powerful magical rituals to create dark artifacts and develop terrifying spells that we know today. One may equate this construction to being similar to that of a Sith holocron. And if you did, then you've made a very astute observation, because the construction of Sith holocrons would actually be based off of the construction of the Sith temples, rune carvings included. This is why many temples that you see nowadays, such as the ones on Malachor, are actually identical to giant holocrons. This bit of information tells us everything we need to know about the Sith themselves and their pursuits within the Force. When you compare it with the Jedi, their opposing ideologies really stand out from one another. The Jedi Temple's construction is built upon a wellspring in the Force, and it's made to evenly distribute those energies throughout the entire temple, just as the Jedi equally share their knowledge in the Force. Whereas the Sith temple selfishly channels all of that energy inwards towards a single point in the temple where only the Dark Lord is allowed to wield it. Jedi temples are largely left empty, save for their archives of knowledge, with plenty of space for practice and meditation. But Sith temples are often filled with treasure and dark artifacts which house dangerous spirits. Jedi temples have gardens which promote life and serenity, but many Sith temples are tombs with dangerous traps that worship the dead and represent struggle for survival. It's truly amazing when we really break down how different these temples are and show us the very nature of one another. But like we said earlier, the Sith temples aren't just for channeling power, but oftentimes they serve as a secondary purpose, as a weapon. The first one we have to talk about is one that you're likely already thinking of, the Temple of Malachor. This place was constructed by Martynas many thousands of years before the Battle of Yavin. This is in canon continuity, so the exact date is shaky, but it was alleged to have been at least built in the year 3966 BBY, and if this is true, then we could line up that with Legends continuity as well, and place its construction right during the wave of the Great Galactic War, which would make a lot of sense. The temple was built to resemble a holocron at the very apex, which housed a massive kyber crystal capable of destroying massive amounts of life. Darth Tanis had her own holocron used as the key to activate this temple, which would turn into a massive ship with a superweapon. The Jedi Crusaders had caught wind of this terrible construct and rushed to put an end to it during an event which would later be known as the Great Scourge of Mandalore. The Jedi Crusaders would lead a raid on the temple, killing as many Sith as they could in order to put an end to their villainous plot. But during the battle, the superweapon fired, turning every Jedi and Sith into statues of hardened ash. Many Sith temples either had weapons or doubled as weapons themselves. Some, like the Temple of Malachor, made the weapon its primary function. But others, such as the Fortress of Darth Revan, had large weapons as a means of self-defense. Revan's Sith Fortress is one that is more intricately constructed once he made his full-time place of residence and research. Much like Darth Plagueis, Darth Revan was a scientist. and it was this fortress on the planet of Almas that would terraform the desolate world with a plant known as the Kaluthan. This plant would actually remove the poisonous atmosphere of Almas and make the planet habitable for settlers to stay. Everywhere, except for a desert around Riven's fortress, was covered with massive amounts of grass and foliage. Knowing that a Sith actually did some good for a planet for a change definitely makes this temple one of the more interesting reads, and how the Sith promoted growth, progress, and light. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, as there were still great horrors that were left within the fortress. On the subject of weaponry, Riven's fortress had the capability to fire huge bolts of Sith lightning from the top, with the range reaching all the way into space. This weapon would actually remain active even after Riven's death. Many places inside the temple was made of Beskar in order to protect his ancient knowledge, but the whole place doubled as a prison. He kept many test subjects in his dungeons, including a single Jedi, none of whom could escape due to the walls of the dungeon having the ability to block the Force. Riven liked to watch his prisoners wallow in despair and give up on all hope as they slowly went insane for being unable to touch the Force. He would even do this to his own apprentice, going as far as to trap her spirit inside of the temple as well. All of this is documented in the autobiography, which is inscribed on the walls of his fortress in the Sith language. Indeed, my friends, Sith temples often boasted not just weaponry, but twisted uses as well. Riven's fortress may have cut Jedi inside off from the Force, driving them crazy, but there was a temple that actively punished Jedi for even being in its mere presence. I'm afraid that we're going to once again have to mention one of the most vile planets in the galaxy, Zygula. The temple that resided on this planet nearly killed Obi-Wan himself, and there wasn't even a single Sith present there. For the full story and effect though, definitely check out the Clone Wars wild space novel. But to put it simply, the Temple of Zygula was a smaller one, being more so a small tower. It had no floors inside of it, but was completely hollow, housing many books, crystals, and Sith treasures. The real prize though, was the vicious holocron that lay inside, a holocron which hated Jedi and actively killed any of them that got near. The temple itself was constructed to amplify the power of this holocron, and when Obi-Wan and Bail Organa crash-landed on Zygula, Obi-Wan was mentally tortured in the most depraved and excruciating way possible. He was thrown into fits and visions where he would be forced to relive some of the most horrific moments in his life, experiencing all of the feelings all over again. He was blocked out from being able to use the light side, and would have frequent hallucinations. When he wasn't dealing with this, a voice constantly chanted in the Jedi's mind, "Die, Jedi, die," either as a whisper or as a full-on scream. The only way to get the voices and the visions to stop was to hurt himself in some way. And by the time Obi-Wan and Bail made it to the temple, Obi-Wan was far too weak. Just by merely looking at the temple when they got close enough, caused Kenobi to pass out and experience the worst fits of his visions by far, to the point where he almost didn't wake back up. The Zygula temple might be the most sinister one by far, and it didn't just want to kill Jedi, it wanted to utterly destroy them, to cut them off from the light side of the Force, mentally torture them until they gave into the dark side, and gave up who they were, before finally granting them a slow and an agonizing death. But what about the ones that didn't have any violent uses at all? Were there any Sith temples that actually tried to make their use as one of progression within the Force? Well, for that, we have to look at our final entry on the list, Vader's castle. In canon, Vader would have his castle built upon a Force nexus by the spirit of Darth Maulman, an ancient Sith architect who possessed his mask upon his death. Anyone who wore the mask of Maulman would become possessed by the spirit. And coming across the mask as a gift from Palpatine, Vader would strike a deal with Maulman whenever he possessed one of the Imperial officers. Maulman would build Vader's castle in such a way that it would use the Nexus to basically open a portal through the Force. Theoretically, this would bring back any spirit to the physical world in their regular body. I think you know where this is going. Vader, of course, wanted to resurrect Padme, and this was his final attempt. After 9 failed castle projects, Maulman finally perfected it and opened the portal. Vader got to at least see Padme before Maulman betrayed him and used the portal to bring back his own body instead. He would then duel Vader and lose. In the process, the portal inside Vader's castle would be destroyed, and with it went his final chance to get Padme back. And that, my friends, is the terrifying construction of Sith temples. It's very intriguing to see many different uses that the Sith have for their temples, from weaponry, prisons, power amplifiers, and even portals into the Force. The Sith clearly exercised their knowledge of the dark side's secrets to create some of the most shocking structures imaginable, and we often read about how the Celestials and the Rakata were known as the Builders, creating extremely powerful projects such as the Starforge, and it seems like this kind of power and knowledge is attainable to modern Force sensitives as well. However, the Sith proved that time and time again, with dedication and much study, these kinds of projects are still possible. But as Luke says, the Sith only ever see things in the negative, which in this case is their greatest flaw. If they applied their incredible knowledge of arcane architecture towards the positive, they could have absolutely changed the galaxy. The Jedi could, and probably should be doing this, but they don't go far enough with their knowledge, which is also a flaw in our opinion. But of course, what do you think? Do you know that the Sith temples were this powerful? Let us know in the comments down below. And as always, may the Force be with you.